Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Arctic Wire Rope and Supply, an Alaskan company providing quality lifting and rigging products since 1983, manufacturing custom wire ropes, chains, and nylon slings here in Anchorage, on the web at arcticwirerope.com.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website, arh.noaa.gov. Get any updates to our forecast there. Call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391, and you can follow us on Facebook or Twitter. Starting off, we'll take a look at the watches and warnings that we have out for the state. In the Haynesboro and Lynn Canal area, we have a winter storm watch for snow and winds, and that is in effect from Wednesday morning through Thursday morning, so keep advised on the website for more information on that. Taking a look further to the north, starting off in the Barrow area, we do have a blizzard warning out. However, conditions are diminishing now, or getting better rather, and that is expected to expire here at 6 p.m. tonight, so very soon on that. However, the blowing snow conditions are stretching out to the east in the Dead Horse area, and we have a winter weather advisory for snow and blowing snow for that area, and that is extending down further to the south. We are expecting conditions there to get better at around midnight. However, those conditions are going to push further into the passes along the northeastern Brooks Range, and the advisory for that area is expected to be out until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Then way down in the upper Tanana Valley, we do have a winter weather advisory out there for snow as well, and that is expected to last from 9 p.m. tonight until 6 a.m. on Wednesday, kind of long-lived one there for that. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, we have a couple main low pressure systems. One is over the western Aleutian Islands area, slowly moving off to the east, and way out to the east, south of the eastern Aleutian Islands, we have a low pressure moving up from the south. And as we watch this loop again, there's a smaller circulation headed right over the eastern Aleutian Islands that's bringing some rain showers to that area as we speak. Then as we look out over much of the northern Bering Sea, not a whole lot of activity in terms of lows. We do have some high pressure over that area. Taking a look now over the eastern part of the state in mainland Alaska, we have the cloud cover out ahead of that next low pressure system making its way into the Gulf of Alaska, starting to get over parts of the southeast. We are seeing some rain and some mix of rain and snow out over that area. And as we look over the main part of the state, as we watch this loop once again, not a whole lot of high clouds over much of the northern mainland Alaska, and the southern part starting to get a little bit diminished with those upper level clouds, and that'll show in our today's forecast with a lot of areas of fog underneath that. And that's widespread, extending all the way out to the western part of the state, up to the Brooks Range area, all the way through the eastern part, down in the south central as well, where we do have a mix of rain and snow. I know it says snow on there, but that's a mix right now. Then as we move up into the state, we do have from the lower Yukon Valley extending up towards the Galena area, some snow mixing in with that fog there. And then up along the Arctic coast, we have some snow, and as we saw with the blizzard warnings and those winter weather advisories, we do have some blowing snow conditions as we get off to the east. Way down in the southeast part of the state, the Yakutat area, we do have some isolated rain showers there. Moving down into the southeast, we have some areas of rain as we get further to the south. As we move out over the west, as we get into the eastern Aleutian Islands, that smaller low pressure system bringing in some rain to those areas. Isolated rain showers stretching out into the western Aleutian Islands behind the low that's coming in from the west. Then out over the rest of the Bering Sea, we do have some patchy fog underneath, or in between those two lows rather. As we move out over the tonight period, that low slowly moving to the east, starting to get a little bit colder behind it, a mixture of rain and snow now, but out ahead, still going to see some rain. And then as the next low comes up from the south, tighter gradient showing some stronger winds there, but also a lot of rain ahead of that from the peninsula down into the eastern Aleutian Islands, some of that making its way out to the Pribilofs area as well. Bristol Bay not expected to see a whole lot, but a mixture of rain and snow in the YK Delta area. As we push further to the north, some patchy fog remaining around the St. Lawrence Island area, and then in the Kotzebue Sound we are going to see some snow and fog mixed in there. Going up further to the north into the western Brooks Range, going to start to see some blowing snow conditions up there, and blowing snow conditions lingering in through the night as we get off to the eastern parts along the Arctic coast. Taking us down into the eastern Brooks Range and the interior, some isolated areas of snow stretching out through much of the area, coming down into places along the Alaska Range with some snow showers on the western side of the Kenai Peninsula, extending up into the Susitna Valley. As we get along the Gulf Coast side, however, and into the Prince William Sound, we're going to see a mixture of rain and snow. And as we get into the southeast, northern locations, going to see some snow mixing with rain and becoming completely rain as we get closer to the Ketchikan area. As we move into Tuesday, pretty similar situation, however, with the front moving a little bit closer, a little bit more warm air, rain conditions extending further to the north, but still going to see some snow as we get closer to Haines and locations up to the north. Along the Gulf Coast, or northern Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound area, still going to see a mixture of rain and snow, with snow to the north of that throughout much of the southeast into the Copper River Basin, and then up into the Alaska Range, places throughout the interior and eastern interior, all the way along the Brooks Range, expecting snow throughout the day tomorrow. And as we get along the Arctic coast, not a whole lot in terms of precipitation, but as we get closer to the Point Hope area, not going to see any snow falling, but enough wind to blow some of the snow that's on the ground around. Seward Peninsula, not a whole lot of activity, but as we get to the YK Delta, expecting to see some areas of snow there, diminishing as we get to the Bristol Bay area, but with our front moving up from the south, we are seeing rain spreading from Kodiak Island down into the Aleutian Islands, and with our next low coming in from the west, going to see some rain continuing throughout the central and western Aleutian Islands as well. Colder in the Bering Sea, a mixture of rain and snow for the Pribilofs expected on Tuesday. As we move into Wednesday, the slow is finally starting to diminish, but we are going to see some colder air moving in with it, and that's going to bring a mixture of rain and snow from the western Aleutian Islands to the central Aleutian Islands and out into the central Bering Sea. However, still a little warmer for the eastern Aleutian Islands, extending up to the Cold Bay area, some rain expected there. Mixture of rain and snow expected for Kodiak Island. Throughout much of mainland Alaska, some stronger winds expected, but not a whole lot of precipitation, with the exceptions of up along the eastern Arctic coast, some isolated snow showers there, and then down in the eastern parts of the Alaska Range, some snow expected there as well. Then with our low pushing off further into the eastern Gulf, we are going to see some rain coming into the southeast, mixing with snow as we get closer to the Juneau and Haines areas. Taking a look now at our temperatures this afternoon, staying in the 30s throughout the southeast, colder near Haines, 30 degrees there, warmer as we get further to the south. Then as we move into the south central, similarly going to see some temperatures in the 30s this afternoon, warmer to the south, Homer 38 degrees, Kodiak 36 degrees. Colder in the Copper River Basin, we are going to see 17 for Golconda, and then as we move into the interior, in the lower parts, seeing temperatures in the 20s. However, as we get further to the north, dropping down to the single digits. 7 degrees through the pass this afternoon, 1 degree for Arctic Village. Coldest in the state right now is 0 degrees at Barter Island. As we move further to the west, though, into places near Point Hope, getting back up into the 20s, and that's going to stay down into the Kotzebue Sound area. 23 degrees for Kotzebue, 27 degrees for Shishmaref. Dropping down into the Norton Sound area. A little bit colder on the north side, Nome 17 degrees this afternoon. However, getting up into the 30s as we get further to the south. And then taking us into the YK Delta area, temperatures in the mid-30s there, in the mid-30s in the Bristol Bay area as well, with King Salmon 35 degrees, Dillingham 34 degrees. Warmest in the state this afternoon, 48 degrees at Cold Bay. Other temperatures around the area in the mid-40s. And then as we push out into the western Aleutian Islands, we are seeing temperatures in the upper 30s there, with Shemya at 38 degrees this afternoon. For our lows tonight, not a whole lot of change in the central and western Aleutian Islands, staying in the upper 30s there. St. Paul down to 38 degrees tonight, in the lower 40s as we push off further to the east. And then in the Bristol Bay and YK Delta areas, getting down into the mid-20s there, with Bethel getting down to 25 degrees, dropping down into the teens throughout the Norton Sound and Kotzebue Sound areas, getting down below 0 as we get along the North Slope coast. -3 degrees, Barrow expected low tonight. Deadhorse down to -6. So we drop down into the interior, single digits for northern locations. A little bit warmer, 10 degrees for Fairbanks and other places around the southern interior, and then taking us down to the south central in the upper teens for many locations, warmer as we get along the Gulf coastline. Home, we're going to stay around that 28 mark, 29 degrees expected low for Seward tonight. And as we get into the southeast, quite a big range there. 20 degrees in the north, getting up down to 38 degrees as we get further to the south. 18 degree spread. And then as we move into highs tomorrow, that trend remaining up to as high as 32 degrees in the north, 44 degrees for the Ketchikan area in the south. Then as we move to the south central area, mid to upper 20s there, with Glen Allen only getting up to 11 degrees. Colder as we get further to the north. In the interior, temperatures only getting up into the mid-teens. And as we get along the Arctic coast, only getting up to the single digits. Barrow only getting up to about 2 degrees tomorrow. Warmer as we get further off to the west. 21 expected high for Point Hope. Down around the Seward Peninsula area, getting up to around 20 degrees there. Tin City getting to 20 degrees tomorrow. Then down in the YK Delta area, mid-20s for most locations. Aniak expected to get up to 26 degrees. Mid-30s as we move into the Bristol Bay area. 34 for Dillingham and Iliamna. And as we get into the Aleutian Islands, just above the 40 mark out there. Shemya getting up to 40 degrees tomorrow. Colder in the Bering, 38 degrees expected high for St. Paul. Switching gears now, looking at our aviation weather. Out over the Bering Sea, with a lot of fog and low stratus, seeing a lot of MVFR with some areas of IFR as well, especially with that low coming in from the west. We can also see some IFR conditions coming in with that next system we have pushing up from the south. And then along the eastern part of the state, with the snow that we're expecting tomorrow, we are going to see some MVFR and occasional IFR conditions with that. Taking a look at the passes, Anaktuvuk should be VFR throughout the day tomorrow, as well as Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill should both be VFR for tomorrow. Rainy Pass should be VFR throughout the day. Windy Pass should also be VFR tomorrow. Isabel should be MVFR throughout the day, and Mentasta should also be MVFR tomorrow, with Tanita Pass being VFR tomorrow. Portage should also remain VFR throughout the day. Chilkoot and White will both start off in VFR, but then drop down to IFR as the day progresses. Switching it up now, we look at our freezing level, staying to the northern side of the southeast, hugging along the Gulf, our northern Gulf coast, and then as we move up along into the YK Delta area and off into the Bering Sea. We do have a tongue of warmer air coming up with that next system we have approaching from the south. We are expecting to see that, especially out over the Gulf. Now we can take a look at our icing. Starting off in the Bering, we have above 7,000 feet there, pretty light. Getting a little bit stronger as we get off to the east, above 6,000 feet as we approach the southeast. Now taking a look at our jet stream, the main part that's going to impact the state is coming up out of the south, 135 knots, coming over the southeast, and then exiting out into Canada at 120 knots. Much of the rest of mainland Alaska, not expecting to see a whole lot. However, a northeasterly flow up to as high as 80 knots coming in towards the Arctic coast. And then we have the other part of the jet, 110 knots out of a westerly direction, staying just to the south of the Aleutian Islands. Taking us down to 9,000 feet now. Flow out over the Bering around the low pressure system, northwesterly flow, 35 knots, dropping down to 20 so we get over the Aleutian Islands and then pushing back out over Russia. As we look out over the main part of the state, flow out of a northerly direction as high as 40 knots out east, dropping down to 20 as we get closer to the high, and then switching to become more easterly as we move out over the Seward Peninsula area, down to 20 knots there. Strongest flow is on the eastern side of the low, coming up from the south, 55 knots, dropping down pretty quickly into the 20s as we get off to the east. And as we move over the southeast part of the state, flow 30 to 35 knots out of a southwesterly direction. And down at 3,000 feet, pretty similar flow, a little bit weaker over the southeast, 15 knots now, but out over the Gulf coming in from the south up to as high as 50 knots on the eastern side of that low coming up, with 25 to 40 knots coming just to the southwest of Kodiak Island, extending out over the peninsula. And then we have flow out around the low pressure out over the Bering, northwesterly flow 30 knots there, dropping down to 20 as we move out into the Bering. Then out over mainland Alaska, northerly flow coming in 30 to 40 knots there, dropping down to around 30 to 40 or 30 to 35 as we get out over the western part of the state, switching again to an easterly direction. Taking a quick look at our turbulence chart now, we have out over the Alaska Peninsula extending in from Kodiak Island down into the eastern Aleutian Islands, with that flow coming in from that low, moving in from the south below 5,000 feet expected light turbulence there. And as we move into the interior, extending out to the west coastline, all the way up to the Brooks Range. We are expecting below 6,000 feet there. Some of that a little bit stronger, a little bit more occasional moderate turbulence, especially along the Brooks Range, and then as we get into the Yukon River area. And if you stay with us, we'll be back shortly for the marine forecast.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Cornfield. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to another edition of Hangar Flying. My guest this evening is Rex Gray. Rex is recently retired Alaska Airlines captain and has been involved in the Alaskan aviation community for many years. He is also the president, or soon to be past president, of the Alaska Airmen Association. Welcome to Hangar Flying, Rex.
Good to be here, Ed.
We might as well start out by talking a little bit about your history in aviation and how you got your start, and also how you came up to Alaska, because that's an interesting story.
Okay, well, I started in 16th birthday, 49 years ago, actually. Well, I would say today, but this is going to air later. But 49 years ago, I took a flying lesson for a birthday present, and I just kept flying, and the airplanes just kept getting bigger. And now I'm to the point of my life where the airplanes are getting smaller.
And so when you decided to come up to Alaska, what was what kind of airplane did you fly up here? And tell me a little bit about that trip, because it sounded interesting.
Yeah, I flew a J3 to Alaska, and we had everything I owned at that time in the J3, in the front seat and behind me. I flew it from the back seat, and in the front seat I had, I don't know what it was, a 12 or 13 gallon tank in the front seat with a little wobble pump, and I would transfer fuel from that to the nose tank. And what got me here was I was working as a flight instructor in San Diego, California, just loving it, but not very much work. And I heard about the aviation opportunities in Alaska. There was a gentleman down there at that time that had developed this new Tundra tire, which actually turned out to be Alaska Bush wheels. He was the original, started that originally. And Guy Selman actually was his name, and he took a Honda three-wheeler, developed a tire for airplanes, and was going to come up here and be a millionaire selling Tundra tires. There was a little problem with FAA approval and so forth. But it eventually turned into Alaska Bush wheels. Mm-hmm. And he put these on this J3 Cub and asked me to ferry it to Alaska, and I put everything I had in there, and away I went.
And you also had kind of an interesting experience with the airplane somewhere near Abbotsford, BC.
Yeah, I was, I was young. Well, I guess what would it have been, 1974-ish or so, 75. So quite a bit younger, and you're a little bit fearless, maybe. And so cruising along, and I'd flown back and forth along the Alaskan Highway a couple other times, and I'm out of Chilliwack, and there's the Fraser River, and the highway's kind of up here, and the Fraser River's down here. So I thought, well, this would be kind of cool, fly down the Fraser River, and I got my chart out and very carefully did my risk management, looking for towers and wires and everything, and thought everything was just great. So, I dropped down on the Fraser River, and I'm down there just kind of following the Fraser River and a roadway up here, and it's quite exciting. And I'm fairly low, quite low actually, not the best judgment, and there, no wires or anything. I had all that figured out. I like to think I was applying risk management at that time, but maybe not the best. I did that for about a half an hour, and it takes a lot of concentration to, keep an eye on everything and watching for hazards and so forth. And finally I got tired of that, and I just added the power and zoomed up and kind of leveled off. And about that time I smelled something, and it smelled like oil. And I says, oh, it can't be oil. And I looked around, and there's a pulp mill and some smoke coming up. Says, oh, maybe it's one of those pulp mills. No, that's oil. And I look around the airplane, I can't see anything, on the landing gear, the struts, and then I see the oil pressure going away. And well, 5 minutes earlier I would have been 100 feet or so over the rocky, I mean very rocky full of rapids, Fraser River. Fortunately, I pulled up and I was about, probably about a couple thousand feet when this happened. And it was not at Kamloops, near Kamloops. I can't remember the exact name of the place at this time, but looked, and there's a farm field down there. Did my nice dead stick landing in the J3 with the nice Trunda tires, and got out and looked, and the landing gear's all covered in oil, and the oil plug had come out of the bottom of the engine. And so I was very fortunate. Even though I'd applied risk management, I thought, I didn't hit any wires, but if I would have had a problem at that low altitude earlier, it wouldn't have turned out so well.
Yeah, well, that's good. And you were able to continue, put oil in, continue on.
Yeah, I managed to, when I realized that what had happened, it was a fairly new engine, and I was trying to save the engine. I saw a place to land, so I shut down the engine and did not do any damage, and was able to dead stick it into this farm field.
That's good. Well, Rex, we're just about out of time here, so I'd like you to come back on the next for the next show, and we'll continue the talk. And folks, consider, if you have a carbon monoxide detector in your airplane, consider changing it. They have a shelf life. They only last for so long, and it's something that this winter, carbon monoxide is tasteless, odorless gas, and with potentially deadly results. So fly safe out there, and thanks for watching.
Welcome back. We'll start off with a look at our ice edge. You can see that we have had some retreating ice over the last couple days with the warmer temps that we've been having, but now that the colder air is back, we are going to see that rebound really quickly, and that does include areas such as Bristol Bay and the Cook Inlet area. We'll take now a look at our marine forecast for our winds out in the southeast. We're starting off with some southeasterly flow, 20 to 25 knots in the south, dropping down to around 15 knots as we get further to the north. Only exception is really up in the northern inside waters, out of the north, 15 knots there. Seas getting up to as high as 7 feet on Tuesday. Then as we move into Wednesday, things picking up a little bit. Still a southerly direction for the most part, switching over to be more easterly, up to as high as 35 knots. And we will have some higher gusts out of Cross Sound as we get into the Wednesday time frame. In the northern inside waters, still out of the north, 35 knots now there, 7-foot seas. Now up to as high as 16 feet as we get out into places of the eastern Gulf, only down to 14 feet as we get to the northern parts of the Gulf. Taking a look at the south central northeasterly flow, up to as high as 20 knots in the north, and then getting up to 40 knots as we get to the southeastern side of Kodiak Island. Seas getting up to as high as 12 feet there, only around 2 feet in Prince William Sound on Tuesday. And as we move into Wednesday, flow becoming more northerly, weaker in the north, 20 knots there, up to as high as 35 knots as we get further to the south, with seas as high as 15 feet. Shelikof Strait a little bit lower, 7 feet, up into Cook Inlet around 5 feet as we get to the northern parts of Cook Inlet on Wednesday. Then as we take a look out over the southwestern part of the state, starting in the peninsula, northeasterly flow, 25 knots on the Bering side, up to as high as 35 knots on the Pacific side. Seas higher on the Pacific side as well, 13 to 14 feet there on Tuesday, 6 to 7 feet on the Bering side. Then as we move into the Wednesday time frame, flow switching up a little bit northwesterly in the western parts, 15 to 20 knots there, out of a bit more northerly direction as we get further to the east, 20 to 30 knots, with seas higher again on the Pacific side, 10 to 12 feet there. Taking a look now over the Aleutian Islands, in the east we have northeasterly flow up to as high as 25 knots, becoming more variable in the middle, and then switching over to become westerly, 20 knots up to as high as 35 knots as we get further out to the west, with our seas out there getting up to as high as 12 feet, dropping down as we get further to the east, down to around 6 feet as we get closer to the eastern Aleutian Islands. Then in on Wednesday, we still have a westerly flow, 15 to 25 knots out west, dropping down in the eastern Aleutian Islands area, variable 10 knots there, and then becoming more northerly as we get closer to the eastern Aleutian Islands, 15 to 20 knots. Taking a look now out over the west coast, northeasterly flow, 20 to 25 knots there, becoming more easterly as we get further out into the Bering Sea, 15 to 20 knots there, with seas 5 to 8 feet. Up to the north, though, we do have some freezing spray with the colder waters up there. Then as we move into Wednesday, continuing with that freezing spray up near the Tin City and Nome areas out of the northeast 30 knots, dropping down to 20 knots as we get closer to the Pribilofs. And then we have our seas anywhere from 7 to 10 feet, lower as we get further to the south, only around 6 feet there. Taking a look around the Arctic coast, out in the eastern parts out of a northerly direction, 15 to 20 knots. Then as we move out over the ice-free waters, we do have northeasterly flow 25 to 30 knots and some freezing spray there on Tuesday. Taking us into Wednesday, easterly flow 20 to 25 knots, continuing with that freezing spray. So get over the ice, we're going to have flow switching to become more northeasterly, dropping down to around 10 knots, and then northwesterly as we get way out in the Beaufort Sea, around 15 knots there. Quick recap out over the weather for tonight. We do have snow out over much of the Arctic coast, extending down into the interior part of the state with some blowing snow conditions up along the coastline as well. Blizzard expected to expire here at 6 p.m., but we will have the winter weather advisories for snow and blowing snow further off to the east in the Dead Horse area, extending down into the northeastern parts of the Brooks Range. Down in the southeast part of the state, a mixture of rain and snow with rain in the south, becoming snow as we get closer to the Juneau and Haines areas. Then along the northern Gulf Coast and the Prince William Sound area, a mixture of rain and snow. So get to the other side of the Kenai Peninsula up into the Anchorage Bowl area, some snow expected there tonight. We have another low pressure system coming up from the south, bringing rain into the Alaska Peninsula, extending down into the central Aleutian Islands, and behind another system we have a mixture of rain and snow there out for the western Aleutian Islands. Taking us into Tuesday, coming a little bit warmer, going to see some rain in the Aleutian Islands, extending all the way out towards Kodiak Island with the low coming up from the south, and a lot of snow throughout much of the interior part of the state and the south central. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.